Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast this week. We have a unique situation this episode because I just got back off the road from 4 shows back to back. And as I'm pulling in down our driveway, Will's loading his last few paintings into his van, getting ready to head off to Artisphere. So there's going to be no preamble between the two of us this week. But that's okay, because Will was kind enough to surprise me with a really great conversation in my Google Drive folder. So we have a great episode to share. For those of you who don't know about our guest, she is Camille Marchese, and she's the executive director with the Coconut Grove Arts Festival in a little beautiful utopia in Miami, Florida, down by the Biscayne Bay. She has a really great story about how she came to the Coconut Grove Arts Festival that I think you'll all enjoy. She has a long history with another top show in Florida, the Winter Park Sidewalk Arts Festival, and she really gets down into what's important to producing a show, kind of the integrity behind producing a quality show with quality artists and why that's important to the longevity of a show. And kind of bringing a show back from, slipping away from their goals and seeing what happens. We've talked over the past few episodes about the jury process. So she talks about how her jury works at Coconut Grove and kind of some of the experiences that she learned from her 20-some years experience at Winter Park. One of the things that Will and I really value about having this platform to talk to festival artists like us is we really want to express a point of view from the artist's world. And we really want there to not be any kind of a conflict where it might seem as though we're advertising for a particular product or service out there on the road. And so we have kind of steered away. We had Stephen King and Cindy Lyric as art show directors right when we came out of the gate, out of COVID. And we thought that was a good opportunity to talk about what show directors were doing to kind of get the industry back on its feet. So just to kind of preface this conversation, we want everyone to choose their events based on where their work has a market and to make your own decisions. This is not a promotion for the Coconut Grove Art Festival. This is really about learning about an integral person who is in this industry, that being Camille, who is on the board for the National Association of Independent Artists, working with other show directors and artists to really elevate the industry and to provide longevity for the shows, which is the way that we find our collectors on the road. So, without further ado, here is Will's talk with Camille Marchese from Miami, Florida.
Oh, great. Yeah, there we are. All right.
Yay!
Technical difficulties are our way to warm up our guests. So that's how we work.
I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I've got all the time in the world for you today.
I really appreciate that. We were going to record yesterday, but I didn't realize it was your birthday. Thanks for being willing. Did you have something fun planned?
I just had lunch with some friends, and then, it didn't end in an O or a 5, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, seriously. That's the old Patton Oswalt bit. He's got one. It's like, you don't even get a birthday between the zeros and the
Does
fives.
he?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with him 100%.
They don't count.
Yeah, no, especially when you're my age, they really don't count.
I think we're probably pretty much the same age, so we won't talk
Well,
about it.
I know how old you are. I'm older than you. You and Douglas are a little bit younger than me. I know from the podcast, because I know your birthdays are like a day apart or the same day or something weird like that, right?
Right. We're one day apart. I think born 12 hours apart or something like that. So, yeah, I forget.
And 2 more different people than you could ever meet.
I
right?
totally agree. It's really strange. It's really funny to me how opposite we are.
But a really good mix. I think you guys are great.
He's funny. I've talked to him about this before, and I think he thinks we just were neighbors at a show in Houston. And they put us a couple booths away, and which was great. I'm rarely his neighbor. I guess I was in Utah one year, but I've said something similar, but I think he thinks sometimes that I don't want to talk to him at all unless it's being recorded. Because like, this is really good stuff. I don't talk to me. Go away.
I mean, I think we all know that we shouldn't talk to you when you're eating. And
yes, I've made myself abundantly clear.
Yes, you have.
Oh man, but, I think I've made myself unapproachable at sometimes. So anyway,
nah, I'm still going to talk to you. Doesn't matter.
Good.
So
Good. Yeah, you can come talk to me when I'm eating too. That's no big deal. So
there you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, folks listening to the podcast, we invited Camille Marchese onto the show. We have not had a director in a while, so I wanted to have a director, and you seemed like a natural fit. You've worked at a couple of the big shows, but then you're also getting a big show kind of back on its feet as well.
I'm trying.
Yeah, it's tough road. I mean, I've always said too, it's like it's got to be harder. And no offense to, I know Katrina Deodato had her hands full there with that show and did a wonderful job for many years. And there's certainly no slight to her at all in saying, but it just, so many different things that happened to that show, to Coconut Grove, the show that you direct, that it was hard, right? I mean, it was really hard to get it back on its feet.
Well, I mean, I think it took a changing of the guard for sure.
Right.
You know, bigger is not always better. And that is the key here. But if you have non-art show people running a show, they don't understand that. And Katrina may very well have understood that, but I don't think she had the position to be able to affect that change. You know, like to me, like 400 artists are just too many. And I mean, the year I chaired Winter Park, we reduced the number from almost 300 down to 225 with 3 emerging artists because we knew, you know, it was just too many people and our layout was awful, and almost 400 artists in that small space was just insane. There's visual fatigue, you know, there's no space between the artists. And what happened really was that the patrons started declining as the booth numbers came up. Like more wasn't better. You know, I have 25 years of history in this, and 23 were with Winter Park. And that is, I think, one of the best shows. It'll always, in my opinion, be one of the best shows because of how they do things.
Right.
It's not as commercial as the show that I'm in now. So it was a learning curve for me there.
So first of all, like, sorry, I'm going to jump in, and this is me breaking the third wall down a little bit and just letting you know that this is never a gotcha kind of show. We're not trying to get anything out of.
I know. I've listened to you guys. I've listened to every podcast, to be honest. So I do know how you guys do this. And actually, I really have learned a lot from your podcast. So,
nice.
I have. I mean, my whole reason for this emerging artist program is because I realized, listening to your artists talk, that they just weren't getting what they needed when they started. So here we go.
So, I mean, that's kind of what NAIA, you're on the board of that, and I am as well. But it's kind of like, that's why we do this. It's like, well, we want to try to, like, this show is kind of why we're doing this too. It's like where show directors and artists meet, kind of breaking down that wall and seeing that we're not so different, that nobody is the enemy necessarily. It's that's why we're doing this, right?
It's really true. I mean, for years when I was with Winter Park, people would call me and say, you know, I'm hesitant to tell you this because I don't want to be blackballed. I mean, we don't blackball people. I mean, I might blackball somebody I know is a buy-sell, but I mean, we should be working together. And I mean, we can't bend and give you everything you need because it's still a business and we still have to, you know, account for the money, but we should try, you know, and I felt like we really did that well in Winter Park, and I'm trying to get us, I'm trying to get, you know, and I think the Grove has come a long way in a short while.
So let's talk about how you got started real quick. Let's hear a little history as far as like, how do you get started in the business of running an art show? Or did you have an arts background?
Well, a little bit, but it's more that when I was a little kid, my mother used to take me to art shows, and I can very clearly remember the first piece she ever let me buy when I was 8 years old. And so it became kind of this thing that we did together. And then I was fortunate enough to go to school in Winter Park. So, Winter Park Sidewalk Art Festival was there every year.
Yeah.
So I would go. I mean, I actually have a picture of the first time I volunteered to sell T-shirts in 1984.
Oh my God. That's
right,
awesome.
exactly. So, and then, it was a thing that my mother and I did. We go, I lived in multiple other places. I was in marketing after school, and I lived in New York and Philly and DC and Atlanta and whatever. And when I came back, I decided to open a small business. It was an art related business in Winter Park. And, I thought, I really want to be involved in that festival. Yeah. And somebody walked through the door, and it was a paint it yourself pottery shop. And one of my customers was telling me that she was on the board. And I'm like, oh, and I told her my story. And she's like, oh, let's get you on the board. So I ended up on the board. And I honestly thought that every art festival was a not-for-profit without any paid people. I mean, I just assumed that everything was run like Winter Park. I just didn't know any better. About, I want to say, gosh, now almost 20 years ago, when I was merch chair there, some guy came to me and said, hey, I've got this idea. We're going to, can we contract and sell your T-shirts and blah, 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 blah. We'll pay whatever. So long story short, like we hired him to run our merchandise every year. And he and I got to be friends. And one year he said, hey, I know you love seeing other shows. I need some help in Coconut Grove. Will you come down? So about 12 years ago, I came down to run a merch booth for him.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, these people actually get paid to do this? Yeah. What I do for free? And I thought, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to be an executive director of a show someday. Anyway, so I made it my business to learn everything I possibly could learn about the Winter Park Festival, So I got to know everything. And I always thought I wanted to be an ED, but not at any show. I wanted to be an ED at Coconut Grove because I wanted to be with the show that was comparable. And I wanted to, I'm an East Coast girl. I didn't want to leave Florida necessarily because I have family here.
Right.
And I wanted, I grew up in South Florida, so I thought it would be a good thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, that had to be a completely different, eye-opening thing to see the merch. I mean, I've seen the merch table at Coconut Grove. I mean, it's expansive. I don't know if it was this when you stepped in 12 years ago, but they used to do this thing. I mean, better than I do, where they do an not outsider art, but an artist that doesn't exhibit on the street, maybe more of a gallery established artist, and have that as their promo. Was it that kind of thing, like a huge merch?
Yeah, I mean, it was just
like a concert.
It was basically just like the idea is that the company that creates the merchandise pays the Grove to be there and then sells decent merchandise, not just a poster on a T-shirt. Whether it's a local artist or an artist in the show, like last year we chose, Benjamin Fry. But,
nice
so it was just, it was a great poster. But the idea was, that this guy owned a printing company and decided that he could help festivals out by creating better stuff for them rather than they could do for himself. So he asked me to come down and help him run a booth. And I'm like, sure, why not? So I would come down every year. I was still learning everything I could in Winter Park, and he ended up selling me his business because he was ready to retire and he knew that I could do this. Okay. So Coconut Grove became my client. So I got to know all the players there really well. And then
now your client as what?
As I was their merch vendor. Okay. I have a separate company that does merchandise, which I kind of stepped back from in order to take this. So anyway, the people, the board members and the president at Coconut Grove knew me, and they knew my relationship with Winter Park. So when they lost their staff, they would call me and ask me well, what would you do here? And how would you do this? And how do you handle Zap? So I finally said, if you need some help, I can come down and help you, cool. And they said, send me your resume. And this is what happened. So, it was very organic.
Yeah, that is very organic. And I love how that, I mean, you already had an established relationship. It's not like they were just hiring. I mean, you certainly could have gotten the job with the resume, but
I think, I think so. A lot of people don't know me and they wondered, how did she get this job? And that's how I got the job. They knew me.
Yeah. Because behind the scenes as artists, we all knew who you were through Winter Park. But so it seemed like a natural fit. And I don't want to gloss over the Winter Park portion of your career too, because that's kind of how you cut your teeth. But kind of the main part too that I want to talk about is Coconut Grove. But I'd love to get a little background as far as what you did with Winter Park and how something like you were talking about, how that you feel is your favorite, and best show in the country. I mean, it really is. It's certainly everybody has a different top 25, but it's a great show.
I've been to other shows. I'm going to other shows, and there are some phenomenal shows out there. Winter Park will just always be near and dear to my heart because it's where I learned everything,
And were you executive director there? You were on the board. How did that work?
Winter Park is an all-volunteer board, and we rotate through committees.
Gotcha.
So that's how I was able to learn everything I needed to learn for here. I chaired it in 2007. So I was on the executive board for, 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And that's kind of how we do it. I mean, it is truly an all-volunteer board. It's crazy.
So you're also learning every step. Like you're not doing the same thing. It's almost like honestly, it almost sounds like a grooming ground for directors if you're doing every step.
I think so. I think so. I mean, there are people that absolutely cannot believe that they don't have a paid executive director, but they've managed to do it so far. You know,
that's similar to Gasparilla. Are you guys in cahoots? Like, was Winter Park and Gasparilla? Did they talk as far as how they run the business? Because it's a similar structure.
Not really. I think it's a similar structure, but not really.
Okay.
Gasparilla would come over occasionally and take a look at the show.
Gotcha. Like come kick your tires a little bit.
Yeah, but we all do that. Yeah. I'd love to go kick tires and see what other people are doing. I mean, that's how I learned about St. Louis's, emerging artist program, right?
Right.
So
that kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, they have an excellent one there in St. Louis, and Stephen King is there, and that's always kind of cool to see him. He's one of my favorites as far as the directors go. I just have known him for a number of years, and it's interesting to me to see the directors and then the relationships that they have. Cindy and Stephen very well, and
I don't see us being competitors at all. Like, I mean, to me, like the only competitor I think we might have is if another show that's on our weekend, right? That's really it. Because it behooves us for us all to do well, because we need all of you to do well to continue this circuit and to continue the cycle. So I personally I think that every director should volunteer for another show and come and help them out. Like, I would love that. Like, I would love to go and volunteer and help somebody else out.
You're going to get some calls. You're definitely,
I'm sure
they're going to be calling.
Some calls. They're going to be, no, I mean, I would, because I think that honestly, like it helps because, I don't have staff here right now. It's not that easy for me, but I do not have staff. And so I really didn't have anybody to back me up at that show. And I kept thinking, like 2 years ago, like, if I broke a leg, what would I do? Like, they wanted me to ride around on a scooter like Steven does. I'm like, I have many things. Graceful is not one of them. I'm like, if I break an arm, what are you going to do? Right. And they said, okay, we'll get you a golf cart. So, but I kept thinking about that, and it did worry me. And so, I hired Cindy to do the emerging artist program for me because, well, hell, she wrote it for St. Louis. So, I'm not stupid. No need to recreate the wheel, but in the back of my mind was, if something happens, there's somebody who could step in and fill in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
really smart.
it was a good fit, and it was really nice to have somebody there that understood shows and any problems I might have.
So the way you run the show and the way I'm kind of hearing about you running the show, it sounds similar to St. Louis and Des Moines, which have a similar feel. There's a big time promoter that seems to do a show every weekend down there in Florida that is a big time promoter. So I was wondering, like, the way you guys run those, and I certainly don't have anything against that business model. It just is a different, it's a different way to handle it. It's maybe not quite as personal to the area. Like with your area, if you have volunteers, you're going to get to know them. With Des Moines Arts Festival, I've gotten to know the volunteers over the years. It becomes like your block becomes like a family. So, I mean, just talk to me a little bit about have you ever had any kind of run-ins with that as far as like that group trying to put a show in or dealing with the dance that it takes between big time promoters and long established shows? I
mean, not really. I mean, years ago in Winter Park, I believe that Howard Allen or another promoter tried to do a show within a short time span of hours, and the city didn't allow it because they felt that we already had two major shows. Like one is the Winter Park Autumn Show, and that's a Florida only artist show, which is kind of nice to have that, and that's in the fall. And then of course we were in the spring, so we didn't really have that issue in Winter Park. Down here, I mean, honestly, there's a show every other weekend.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it doesn't really, it doesn't really impact us that much because the artists are different, you know. I mean, a lot of our same artists will do a Howard Allen show, or we'll do, you know, another promoter show. That happens, but I don't really think it impacts us.
Cool.
Like, I think, you know, I think we're large enough and big enough that it doesn't affect our crowds. It may have when we had 400 artists in the show. It may have been like, well, why should we come and pay to come into your show when I can see that guy, you know, next week at the Rotary or whatever.
Yeah. The perception among artists sometimes is that those guys are trying to get in on the well-established market, or they're trying to do this over here. And I've always had big promoters as like a tool in my toolbox. You know, it's like, look, I've got this show and this show. There's 2 weeks in between. I don't want to drive all the way to Florida. Let's see if there's a good fit, etc. Yeah. So it's a great way to work out a season. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to hear about.
Yeah, I think there's room for everybody. You know, I really do. You know, and you know, and I mean, I use that a lot when people were upset about not getting into my show. My audience, I'm like, yeah, but there's a show the weekend before, there's a show the weekend after. Your audience will come to you if you're there, right?
Yeah. And is St. Stephen's still happening there right next door to Coconut Grove? Okay.
Absolutely. You know, and I send people there all the time.
Yep.
And, you know, and why not?
Sure.
Why not? It's right there.
It did not work for me. I tried doing it one year. I didn't get into the Grove. And then I went down there and I was like, man, this feels like selling knockoff T-shirts in the rock show parking lot. I want to get into the rock show. But,
I mean, I don't think it's for everybody. But, you know, I will say that we get a lot of applications from more crafty kind of people.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like fine craft, you know.
Sure.
So, I mean, I will always recommend, you know, if somebody comes to me that is more crafty, you know, like beading, you know, you know what I'm saying. I don't want to insult anyone.
But crafty is different, you know.
Yeah, I will always like recommend, you know, I get the lady that's making the denim jackets or upcycling the denim jackets, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, they're cool, but they're not in my show, but maybe they would go in St. Stephen's. Why not? You know,
absolutely. You kind of cut your teeth at Winter Park, in Winter Park at that show. Big difference between like Winter Park and Gasparilla versus all of the other shows that I have ever done is the prize money. Like it's great. Like they have crazy prize money at those shows. They're just like year altering money at some points. So
they really do. They do.
How do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with those kind of sponsorships and getting that? I don't know how you deal with prize money. Is that something that's always established, or are you hunting for it every year?
We put it in our budget. You know, I mean, it costs like $1.5 million to put on this event. You know, we spent $300,000 on marketing alone. So it's what you do. So it's just in our budget. You know, we do have sponsors that we have every year. We have hired somebody to specifically go out there and get our sponsorships for us, which I think helps a lot. Because I mean, I'm so new to the area that I don't know all the power players down here.
Right.
And we do have a president who's been established here for years that is instrumental in also helping us retain some of those sponsorships.
Okay.
So that's how we do it.
Yeah. And is that somebody, an outsider, or somebody on your staff?
Years ago, when the executive director left, they hired a man named Monty Trainer, who is kind of infamous here in Miami. And they hired him to be the president rather than executive director.
Okay.
So he is very well known, very, very well politically connected, and he is that person. But we have hired an outside company to work with us for the sponsorships, and they work with Monty very closely.
And then again, that goes to not reinventing the wheel. Somebody does that for their, you know, that's what they do. Let them do it.
It makes the most sense.
Yeah.
It just makes the most sense. And for us, and especially for me, I mean, I can do sponsorship, but I don't know all of the people here as well. I mean, I will if I stay,
Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
but for right
You'll
now,
get
I
to know
think
them in a hurry.
yeah, I am getting to know them all in a hurry. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm
But yeah,
sure it
so
is.
that's how we do it. I mean, our prize money isn't near what Gasparilla and Winter Park
No,
is.
but it's substantial. It's not nothing.
No, but I think it's a draw. I mean, Florida is, it's a hype for a lot of artists.
Absolutely.
And I know the shows in the Midwest generally don't have as much prize money as we do. And and one of my survey questions always is how important is prize money? And it's usually about 30%
Yeah.
that say it's very important. I'm glad that we have it, but we
Absolutely.
also give an equal amount to scholarships. And that's really important to me. Like last year, we gave away $55,000 in scholarships.
Wow.
This year we have, we're trying to do the same. I'm trying to get us a little bit more so we could maybe do 70, but that's important to me and it's important to the board. So
that's really exciting. And I don't know, it helps make the event a community event as well, which I think is the difference between, promoter shows and once a year events. It makes it more part of that community. So the people that are coming out to it, they're all bringing people back year after year. And I think that helps build something special.
I think so. I think it is definitely a community people. It is. We have a local family that gives 2 awards, one glass award and one jewelry award every year in memory of their mother. Right.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
It's wonderful. And when I talk to this woman, she takes such ownership of the festival. She's never been on the board, but she is so passionate about the festival. And, you got to love that. So I think there's the difference between a promoter show and a show like ours.
Absolutely.
Like a true nonprofit.
Yeah, definitely. Because you just don't have the promoter show doesn't have the energy because they've got another one in 2 weeks or what have you. It's no knock on them. It's just a different business.
It's a different business model. That's all it is, and it really works well for them. And I guarantee they're going to be able to retire and have a much better IRA than I am. It's all good.
I just had a talk with my financial advisor before we started talking. I was like, I'm shaking. I might have to tell Camille to like I don't talk.
I know. Trust me, I haven't finished my taxes yet.
Oh God!
I can grow everything but myself, so it's all good.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be right back. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Hey, Douglas, do you remember what it was like before Zapplication?
Are you talking about back in the day when we applied with slides and red dots at the bottom?
I don't actually know what you're talking about because I'm not 70, Grandpa. Anyway, it's nice not to have to do that again. I remember Cindy Lyric was just talking about slides.
And Cindy Lyric said you could imagine it how it's supposed to be right side up and turn your head on the side.
Yeah, that is not Zap's tagline. Imagine it correct. It's just always the right way.
We want to send out our thanks to Zap for sponsoring us this week.
There has been a lot made of the jury selection and the jury process over the last, I don't know, entirety of my life, I guess. But, there's always that talk. And you've had some really interesting first-hand experience with that. And how do you handle the jury for Coconut Grove?
Last year was the first year that I handled it on my own. The year before that, they had a board member who'd been doing it for many years, and they did it locally.
Gotcha. And was it done exactly the same way every year? Like they kind of handled it?
Pretty much. And it was local people, local jury. But I really disagree with that. Like, I feel like you have to have outside expertise. Like in Winter Park, maybe because there's so many, believe it or not, there are so many amazing artists in Orlando. Well, that, right? I mean, you've got the Whipples, you had Matthew, you had the Smiths. I mean, there's so many amazing artists in Orlando. We always picked our jurors from outside of Florida.
Okay.
Specifically, so that no one could say that they were prejudiced for or against the local artists.
Interesting.
And
that's even above and beyond what a lot of shows that I do or I respect and don't do. That's different even and more, has even more integrity, I think, than not maybe more integrity, but you definitely are getting more nitty gritty and being more particular.
It's based in integrity. Prior to my years with Winter Park, there had been some sort of a rumor that their jury wasn't as fair and balanced. So this is why they did that. And they spent a lot of money bringing in jurors. I felt that we needed to repeat that here. The only way I could do it, because my budget is very small for my jury, we went to a monitor jury.
Okay.
And I could have people from across the country.
Sure.
And I felt very strongly that I needed to have a few show people in, because there's so many buy-sell that apply.
Right.
And
cheaters.
They look really good. Yeah. Cheaters. They look really good in the applications, right? And I could weed them out myself, but I'd rather my jury do that. I'm not going to let them slip through.
Right.
But, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out who these people are.
Of course.
But I can't, I don't know them all. I can't figure it all out. So I think it helps to have somebody that has been to the show, that has seen the garlic grater. I think
sure.
that's important.
So, I've got quite a bit to add to this and up close and personal experience, especially just recently through my wife jurying St. Louis. Her take on it was even more so we have so much as artists at stake. It has an awful lot of our careers involved. I've been cut myself from my favorite shows, my best shows. I don't get in. We all have experienced that as artists, but as an artist or a peer juror, the way it matters, especially to an empath like my wife, every single cut hurts her to the core. She's like, oh my God, this artist that I've admired my entire career, this colleague of mine, I got 3 no's to my 1 yes, or 4 no's to my 1 yes, and she'll fight for them what she can. But at the same time, it's to us, it matters. And the argument on that is a loud argument, but to be brutally honest, I think it's a very minority, squeaky wheel kind of argument. I think the artists in the business know we have to have these peer jurors.
Well, I also think, it's a matter of integrity. And it's a matter of choosing jurors that have integrity, and I can tell you that the jurors I chose last year and the jurors I choose this year will have integrity, and that can be debatable, and I can give you examples, but I choose not to, because I don't want to call anybody on the table, but I can tell you that I know, there were particular artists that a couple of jurors didn't like, but their work was still so good. They got a 9 out of a 10.
Absolutely.
So I know that the integrity is important. To me, if you question somebody else's integrity and you question what someone else might do when faced with somebody they don't like, I think that speaks volumes about the person that's questioning. To me, I know how I would behave. So apparently, it's projection, but I'm just assuming that the squeaky wheels would behave in an inappropriate manner.
Yeah, it's always,
but
they're going to be the loudest and the proudest about their opinions. Whether they, and a lot of times they just don't matter.
They're not also going to do the right thing. They're going to judge on personality versus true, merit.
So you had, so you had a former or a current board member handling the jury, and you decided to take it on and do it more like your Winter Park experience and to do that.
I needed to shake it up a little bit, and I needed to make it fair.
Sure.
We also went from almost 400 people in this show to we had 276 artists in this last show.
Wow.
So that's, 120 some, artists that are not in the show. So there's a lot of factors into play here. Not only did I change out the jurying, we also had less spaces available. But I was really excited to see that we had over almost 100 artists that had never been in the show before,
Yeah.
or who hadn't been in over 20 years. And to me, that's important. This idea that just because you've done the show for so many years that you deserve to be there isn't fair.
No.
It's not fair to the new artists that are up and coming. It's not fair in general. It's not fair to expect a show to be stagnant. I mean, I love the idea of seeing my friends over and over and over again. And I love knowing that I'm going to see certain people at certain events. But the idea that anybody should be grandfathered into a show is ludicrous. This is how we get new blood into this industry.
Absolutely.
We want this industry to thrive. We want it to move forward. I want this festival to be here 20 years after I'm gone,
right.
And that's not going to happen if we don't have younger people coming up and we don't give younger people the opportunity, not even necessarily younger, but new blood. And that's important. And you don't get that if you don't change your jury.
Of course. That's something that I noticed, and I spoke to Douglas about last time, is that I felt like Bayou City or Winter Park. I talked to Clifton about that too. He was my neighbor, and he said, have you noticed, does it feel a little bit like there's a changing of the guard? And that was interesting to hear from an artist of his caliber, a constant award winner. I mean, he's one of our rock stars. And to hear that kind of thing come out of his voice, I'm like, yeah. And, me getting rejected from my favorite show this year at Fort Worth just makes me want to kick my own ass and apply with some new stuff and see how I can tweak my work, how I can make it better. And does it hurt? Of course. And I know it hurt for the other folks that didn't get juried into one of their favorites. Of course, it always hurts, but
it's horrible.
Yes.
And it's like hitting that button that afternoon is the worst thing I ever have to do.
Right.
Sending out those rejection letters. I hate doing that. But I also know that I don't have a choice. You have 900 people applying for 240 spots. Right.
And if you're lucky, half of those 900 you could see at your show, which makes it really hard to cut the fat.
Yeah. And that's the problem too. So I mean, I tell people all the time, even if you're waitlisted, it's still not an honor, but I mean, you're up against some serious competition when you're applying for some of these shows, right?
Yeah.
So
and another little bit of insight on my wife's side, sometimes the jurors that you get to the wait list, you just run into a difference in opinion. And sometimes the wait list is the best that you're somebody who likes it's not a personal thing, but approves of your vision and sees your vision and sees what your craftsmanship is all about. Yeah. They can get you to the wait list. Then you're like, okay, well, maybe it's just, it's to fate. Maybe the wait list is all I can do as far as this particular jury, because sometimes it just doesn't work.
It doesn't. And, we do it a little bit differently. We don't, St. Louis has rounds and rounds and rounds.
Right.
I believe that numbers don't lie, so I do a yes, no, maybe round that I let my jurors do on their own. So they're taking all their time to look at these and they're reading all the statements, and anybody that gets a five no's is automatically out. So we have less to go through live.
Of course.
And then I have them score, and they score 1 to 10. And then after that, I take the numbers and I simply take the top 200 and whatever of the top scores.
Right.
And then that section right below becomes my wait list.
Okay.
So there's less emotions in it. It's just like there are times where I don't even look at the names. I just look at the numbers, and I just then delete the bottom, and then I start going through it.
Yeah.
I do that because I feel that numbers don't lie, and that makes it, there's no debate. There's no well, we need this many. I don't care. I mean, I do want it to be diverse,
of course,
but I don't care if it's 45% 3D and, 65%, whatever. I'm saying the numbers wrong, but you know what I mean? I don't care if it's that balanced 2 and 3D. I care that the art is such that you would want it in the show.
Interesting.
So to me, that's more important than that I have 20 watercolors and 40, I'd rather them all be the best. Now, obviously, if I went back and looked at it and they were all like one media, that would be something I'd have to consider.
Right.
But that never happens. We know that never happens.
Do you ever run across a juror who's trying intentionally to throw it and is giving quality work ones
and just so that they have a bigger say? Because I've heard rumors about stuff like that.
I've seen that, but not under any jury that I've run. But
Nice.
I have seen it.
Okay.
Because you can tell, you can tell.
I almost think that there
happens.
ought to be, like, you take artistic integrity, originality, how you carry it through, overall vision and presentation, right?
Yeah.
Those are your things. And if
That's
you
it.
judge them on those, then it's like, okay, Jay Long, Jay is the last artist that I spent a long time talking to. He's my across the street neighbor at Fiesta down in San Antonio, and I love the guy. So we had some really interesting conversations about the jury, like you might not like Jay's vision. You might not like my vision. Okay.
Right.
Jay and I both have a pretty similar background. We were both trained as illustrators, so I don't mind speaking to his experience a little bit. Jay is an award-winning illustrator, fine artist. You cannot have a jury give him a 1. Like, there's just no 1s for Jay. It's like, if you're judging it on those 5 aspects, there's no 1s. How are you going to look at that and call it a 1? So that's where people start to get upset. And you're like, well, what the hell are you looking at? It's like, it may not be your style, but it's a trained vision and it's well pulled off.
Yeah. I mean, when I've juried a show or two, and
of course,
there are things that I don't particularly care for, but I can still, like, I wouldn't want them hanging in my home, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve an 8 or a 9.
Right.
I mean, you have to set your personal ideas and likes aside. And that's one of the directions that I give my jury.
Right.
You have to put your personal likes and dislikes aside and look for artistic integrity and artistic excellence.
Yeah,
really.
At the excellence.
And that's how you end up with I do like I appreciate the way St. Louis does their show. I definitely do. But I feel like that's just too much of a burden to put on the jurors. I like the idea of just, you score them and I'll take it from there.
Okay.
And I don't change scores, I mean, I'll go back through and it's never happened, but if I found the garlic grater had gotten a high score, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen.
Sure.
But I really do stand by my jury's results. I had a couple of unhappy artists last fall pretty much say, well, you're the director, you can do whatever you want. Most directors hold a few spots. Well, I don't do that.
Yeah.
And I won't do it. I stand by my jury because I like all of you.
Sure. And it's interesting to hear how you run yours versus how I know some others run theirs. And what you're speaking to on St. Louis is that there are rounds where you get to then debate and talk about. And I do think that that's an interesting aspect to their jury, where they do get to come to, okay, here's this, let me explain what you're seeing here, whereas, okay, you may not have known, you may not have read the complete artist statement, you may not have seen the fact that this is a kinetic sculpture, because there are only stills or a kinetic photograph almost.
We do that during the rounds.
Okay.
I mean, we read every statement and I allow my jurors to talk about things while they're going through it.
Okay.
But we just go through it those 2 times. And it's mostly because that's how we did it in Winter Park. I mean, I won't lie. I mean, that's how I did it for 23 years.
That's how you cut your teeth. That's how you learn the business, and it worked.
Well, exactly. And we had those jurors in Winter Park. We brought them in. So we had them for 1 day. So that's how we did it. And the luxury of having jurors for a few days is not something I've ever had before. So that's why I do it this way. And it works, though, because numbers don't lie. And we also give them a chance to talk about it during the first round, like during the only real live round. So, I mean, it took a lot longer. It took us probably 20 hours to go through, I think, about 700 applications.
Yeah.
So, that round took a lot longer, but it worked. I think you come up with the same things, ultimately.
Yeah. So that seems like that's a huge kind of roadblock almost in putting together a show. It seems like I know some shows, I don't know when you announce, it's been a couple of years since I've done the Grove, but I know there are a couple of shows that are out there that are like on Friday afternoon, 5:00, right as they're leaving the office, they'll be like, and synth, let's go get drinks.
Yeah. I don't do that.
Okay.
I know who you're talking about, and I understand that, but
Totally.
I get it, but I also do space assignments at that same time. Like our space assignments are first come, first serve,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you get that acceptance, you're going to immediately tell me, you're going to immediately accept and tell me where you want to be. And that's how I'm going to log your request, like first come, first serve. So I don't think it's fair to do that to somebody on a Friday afternoon at 5. Like, I'm going to let you know that it's probably going to be on a Wednesday in the middle of the day to give everybody a chance. If you're driving from a show or to a show, I don't want you to be penalized because you can't answer your email right away.
Nice.
So for me, it's usually like a Wednesday in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day.
Perfect.
But yeah, it sucks because
oh my God,
the phone starts and you just, you got to answer, and and you're going to get unhappy people, and it's just part of the job, It's
you
just
know
part
what?
of the
If you
job.
did a good job, then there are going to be unhappy people, right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
There's always surprises because that's how it goes, right?
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit. I want to change the subject a little bit and talk about some of the things that you've dealt with. So from my perspective, what you guys ran into used to be a boat show there, right there. Is that true? Used to be a boat show. So there
is a boat show every weekend.
Okay.
And the location was closer.
Gotcha.
To our show.
Do you think that affected the attendance or?
I think what really hurt us more than the boat show was that we started to increase the number of artists in the show.
Gotcha.
I think when you have a show like ours or any show, you're not probably going to get 400 artists of a certain caliber.
When you have 400 artists, you have to take some shit that you didn't want to put in your show. If you're just filling out if your budget is relying on 400 booths, and that's part of your budget, then you've got to take some stuff. You're like, okay, well, if you want to have your quality, if that's what you're trying to say, but if you want to have your quality be of a certain level, you can't have that many because you don't have that many applicants.
And so I think that's a trickle down thing. So now you come to the show and you're expecting a certain caliber, and yet you see things that shouldn't be there, or things that you might see at, the market on a Sunday or that kind of thing. So there's no need for you to come back the next year.
Right.
So instead of realizing that it's the level of art, you have people thinking, well, we just have to increase the number of booths to make up that revenue. So it's a sliding scale. And I don't think, Katrina did a great job. Katrina, Matt, Catherine, they all did a great job. I just think that they were looking at it as more of an event rather than an art festival.
Sure.
And I think the difference with me having been involved with an art festival that is really, no one gets paid in Winter Park, right? We're all doing it for the love of the art festival. So we're coming at it from a different perspective.
Right. And I think that's what you're going to enjoy about Artisphere coming up this weekend is I think that they put together, and Des Moines too. I'm trying to think about these shows that exist in, maybe not the biggest city in the world. We're certainly not, these aren't Chicago. Coconut Grove is also, it's drawing, Miami's huge, but the Grove area is not. So
when I came into this festival, when the board was interviewing me and I asked them, did you want to have the biggest party in Miami or do you want to have the best art festival in the country? And to one of them, they said the best art festival in the country. I'm like, okay,
nice.
Then this is how we have to do this. Bigger is not always better. And true to their word, they let me reduce the number of artists in the show. And that was a chunk of revenue for them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot when you reduce, at an $800 booth fee and you're reducing 100 and some artists.
Sure. Is there a different way to look at it? I remember Stephen King saying it was like 8%, if I'm remembering this correctly, like his booth fees were like 8% because he's going after all these sponsors. It becomes like, these shows that do it, that have the size show to their municipality and they keep it small within that.
That is true, I think, in other markets.
Yeah.
But if you look at Miami, there's an event every other weekend. Sponsorship money is not as plentiful here. because there's so much competition.
Right.
You know, I mean, I can't speak to Des Moines. I can't speak to Greenville. I can't speak to those other cities, but I can tell you that there's an event every weekend here that we're vying for sponsorship dollars.
Gotcha.
Sponsorship money is down across the country right now. That I do know for sure. So it's not like, and I believe that too. I would love for our booth fees to be just a smaller percentage of our operating budget, but
how do you do it? Yeah.
There's a limit when there's not, you know, there's a boat show that weekend. There's a show in Wynwood. There's so much competition in the winter in Miami.
I guess that's what I was asking. You know,
one tiny bit. You know, I mean, it is ridiculous. Now they've decided that this little campground that we've had going for years, kind of under the table, they've realized it. So now we're going to have to put in lights and bathrooms, and we're going to have that permitted. So that's going to change, you know, everything, you know, it's always something. So yeah, it's an expensive show to put on, and our booth fees are an integral part of that, but they're not the only thing.
Sure.
Like, I believe strongly that your booth fees shouldn't be, they're not the bulk of your operating expenses. They can't be, you know, I mean, we wouldn't have this show if it wasn't for you. Right. So without the artist, you don't have a show.
Okay. So you reduce the booth fee size, and what else do you do to try to bring, is that it? You just let the word of mouth kind of get, hey, I went to Coconut Grove last year and the quality was great. Like I saw.
You mean for the artist or for the public? I mean, we spent about $300,000 on marketing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we brought in a marketing agency, a production company that has their own marketing agency, and they do a lot of our heavy lifting, our logistics, you know. So they handle I oversee it, but they handle the marketing. And we spend a lot of money on that.
Yeah.
And I say that we get a qualified buyer through. There was a little thread that was going around, and I chose not to respond to it the week of the art festival about, I can't believe Coconut Grove is charging $25 at the gate. How much money are they making? Well, first of all, we don't charge $25 for every person. Kids are free under 12, and there are a lot of buy one, get ones out there.
Yeah.
I'd say that probably 50,000 people, maybe that many paid. But the idea behind that is that that's bringing a qualified buyer. It's not bringing the person that wants to come, you know, and maybe for $10, you might want to come and, you know, look around, and you'll buy a hot dog and you'll buy a margarita or whatever. But at $25, you're probably pretty serious about art. So I think that helps bring a more qualified buyer. Because again, it's not necessarily quantity, it's quality, when it comes to your patrons.
Yeah.
So there's that. And, you know, and luckily, like this past year, I mean, I've heard a lot of artists say, when they didn't think I was listening, that, you know, there wasn't a person at that show that didn't deserve to be there. And that is great to hear.
Yeah.
Like when you hear that, that makes other great artists want to apply.
Yeah.
You know, I had an email from somebody recently who I met when I was visiting St. Louis, who generally doesn't do Florida shows. And we had talked about potentially using this person as a juror. And he emailed me and said, hey, you know, instead of that, I think I'd really rather apply to be in the show. And I was like, yes, you know, stuff like that makes me really happy. But it's that, you know, it's going to take a while. We're not going to win a Pinnacle Award next year.
Sure.
It's a slow, steady climb back up, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll do everything I possibly can to keep it fair for the artist, but, you know, do what I have to do for the show.
Absolutely. It makes sense. And, you know, we hear good things and we hear bad things, but you hear some really great things too. You know, it's just, it's nice to have you on here and talking about the ins and outs of how you kind of, you know, you're not starting this from scratch. You've got your own history with Florida shows, the Florida market, and just having a director that kind of knows the ropes going in and taking over from something that has had its own success in the past. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, I mean, I think the thing about shows in general is that they're going to have good years and bad years, you know?
Right.
And we're not going to be able to make everybody happy. I mean, we can't, you know, and not everybody's going to have sales in every market. And sometimes it's going to be your show and sometimes it's not. You and I both know that, you know, a lot of times the artists that actually complain about not selling, I've seen them sitting in the back, not talking, not actually interacting with their customers, and you see that it's not, your work isn't going to sell itself. Well, if I walk into I'm a patron, right? I go to every show, and I remember there was a particular artist I was so excited to meet, and I walked in and I could not get that artist to look up from their phone, the entire time. And I just thought, wow, I really wanted them to apply to my show, but I walked away never having met her, and it just, so, there's two sides to every story.
As artists though, I feel like sometimes we bail on a show mentally, and it's hard to stay involved. It's like, okay, if I've taken it on the chin on Friday, Saturday, it's Sunday afternoon, I'm like, look, it's not my market. I'm going to see what my kids are doing.
I get it. I mean, I can see that too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's life, right? That's in general. It's hard to get up every day and be enthusiastic when you've had 2 bad days in a row. I get that, so I do. And I know it's not like, I had 2 years ago, my first year at Coconut Grove, there was one artist who really was just so excited to be in the show, and he didn't do very well, but I looked at his work and it was lovely.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't for this market.
Sure.
I do a survey after the festival, and I pretty much knew his answers just based on what he was saying.
Right.
Because they were the same comments he gave me personally. And I thought, well, I felt so bad. But again, the work just wasn't going to, wasn't going to rise above everything else here.
Right. Yeah. And, and sometimes it's subtlety, and it depends on how a show is, sometimes it depends on how a show is put together. If you have super subtle white on white kind of, I remember this one artist was doing this porcelain work, and they were set up next to Dakota. I mean, Dakota Pratt is awesome to have at a show, but you ain't competing with rideable bananas. You're just not going to do it.
No, you really, and that's that's on the director a little bit too.
Right.
Like, it takes me forever to do that layout, because I need to make sure that it's going to work for everybody, and it's not easy.
No, it's not.
Really not. I mean, the first thing I panic over is releasing the rejection letter, the you didn't make it in letter.
Right.
And then the second thing I panic is the booth numbers, I literally will go over that. I probably go over those and switch them and change them. It probably takes me about 300 hours. Jeez. I don't stop, because it's just because you just, okay, no, maybe that's not going to work. And you wake up going, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. But there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I don't think a lot of artists realize that. Like, it's not just something we do on a whim. We don't just throw the numbers in the air and go, okay, this is what you got,
right.
And I believe strongly, and this is another thing I got really reamed on last year by a few old timers. I think everybody's booth number should change every year. I think everybody deserves that chance at that little bit of notoriety. Everybody deserves that option to be seen. Nobody should be guaranteed a same space for 18 years.
Hold on a second, fair. Camille. Do you hear that? Do you hear it? Suddenly it's as if all the artists started screaming out at once. I want my booth space back. How are they going to find me?
I know, but they will. But the thing is, I literally had when I changed everybody around that first year, I ran into an artist at St. Louis, and he said, I was really upset, but it was the best thing that ever happened, because people were coming up to me saying, I've never seen you before. And he was in a pretty visible space for 12 years. I know everybody wants to be where they are, and sure. I get that. But anybody that's really going to spend a significant amount of money is going to walk your show. They're not just going to buy on a whim. I mean, maybe the guy coming in from Ben will tell you the story about the wealthy person coming in off the boat show and just plopping down money. But that's rare. Most people that are going to come and buy at a show are going to walk the show.
Right.
And they're going to look. They're going to look at what they want a painting. They're going to look at all the painters. They want something 2D. They're going to look at that. I believe. That's how we did it in Winter Park. And it never really hurt anybody. People are going to look for you. And if they're your people, and it's also a little bit of your responsibility to have your mailing list and tell them where you're going to be, and it's not it's a big show, but it's not a big footprint. So, if you're in
it's
the
an easy
300,
walk too. It's straight.
It's an easy walk.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't it straight with a little bit of
Yeah, it's a loop. It's a giant loop.
Okay.
So it's not like they're tricky alleys and different, it's in some ways it's much easier than Winter Park to find somebody, I believe, because there's not a lot of different alleys and offshoots. It's really one giant loop.
Yeah.
But I know that artists disagree with that, but I also think that it does you good too, because people really will. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many artists told me, people were coming up to me and telling me, like, I've never seen you in this show before.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I get that every show. It's like, have you ever done this before? I'm like, yeah, every year for like 8 years. And yeah, I have new work, but like whatever. But I mean, I do think that, I mean, I don't mind disagreeing with you. I love having my booth space back, but I love hearing why you do it that way too. Yeah. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think as artists, it's so funny because we are known as like this hyper liberal group. Everything's kind of loosey goosey. That's the most conservative group of people. If anything changes, we just don't like it because
you don't like it.
Well, it's like there's a comfort in knowing exactly, like I did South Lake for the first time and pulling into this thing, and I'm like, well, I've never pulled down the street before. I don't know how this works. If you've never done it before, you get nervous. And if you have done it before, you want the comfort, you want that comfort of like, well, I know where to get coffee. I know where to use the restroom.
Well, I don't necessarily think that you have to be moved across the festival.
Sure.
I think my bigger issue are the corner spaces, right?
Yep.
Because people walk in, like your patrons walk in. They're always going to come in through the same, that we have 4 entrances, but people are also creatures of habit, right? So they're always going to come in from one entrance, and they're always going to see the same people. And when they see that same person with that same big identifiable body of work in that same location, 12 years in a row, they say, why should I come back next year? This stuff never changes.
That's it.
I mean, I've talked to people that are like, yeah, I walked in, I saw the same things and I left. I'm like, but you paid and you still, I saw it. There's no point in me walking around. Everything's the same.
Wow.
And so that is another reason why we have to keep it fresh too.
Sure. So we talked about jurying quite a bit. We talked about kind of the difficulty of promoters. You guys how heavily do you lean on food and alcohol sales? Do you let the vendors handle it, or do you take that for yourself, or how does that work?
Our food and beverage profits go towards paying the production company.
Okay.
We have to hire people to put this thing physically together.
Gotcha.
We have the fencing, we have the tents, we have the porta potties, and we have everything to consider. And the operating budget is now over 1.5. The city doesn't cut us any slack on permits. We pay for everything. We pay for parking.
Yeah.
We pay for every little thing. We pay for the trash pickup. We have to scrub the streets twice. Last year, we scrubbed the streets 3 times after the festival to make sure all the plastic ties were gone because the residents get so upset about plastics near the ocean. So it's a costly festival to produce.
Sure.
We have a skeleton crew. I have no assistant, it's just me. So it's not, it's a much smaller, I bring in help, for the month before the festival, but as of right now, we have our president, who is Monty Trainer. We have an administrator, the festival administrator, we call her. And then we have me, and that's our staff. So this is how we pay for those, food and beverage is how we pay for the people that actually come in and put up the fencing. It works for us.
Yeah. So you guys, you guys started fencing that show. It's 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
So it was way before my time. And I want to say it was definitely prior to 2012, because that's the first time I ever came. And, I think, from what I'm told, they started fencing it because it wasn't, it's Miami. Let's face it, It's a giant party. So what I was told is that the sales weren't great when they were before.
Okay.
Because there were so many drunk people in the streets. It's a free, free, but here's an event. We'll come, we'll drink,
sure.
and you can't make a sale and you've got like 5 drunk people in your booth, right?
Right.
I mean,
cocaine, yes. Drinking, no. I could.
Nope.
Where do we? How do you get the?
Work now.
How do you get the Coke money back into Miami, Camille? How do we?
I don't know, but I don't.
I've heard those stories. Yeah, I've heard stories. People whipping into their pocket and just peeling off hundreds and buying out people's booths, and I want those dirty pillows of money in my pocket.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
I'll sell to
I
anybody.
do too.
Are you kidding me? I just got back from Texas. I'll sell to anybody. Your Amex is I can't fold your Amex. Give it to me. I don't care what your politics are.
It's true. I mean, let's face it. I don't know. I think that there's still a lot of that money here in Miami. And I think it's evident with some of the people and some of their sales. I mean, not everybody that comes to my show has sales like that, but
sure.
I do hear some great numbers out there, and then I also hear the people that didn't cover their booth fees. So you hear that too, right? But you're going to hear that with every show. Exactly.
I don't, it's funny. I don't sell that well in Florida, but I've got close friends, and my ex-wife crushes it in Florida. She does great. I'm like, great. I'll watch the kids have fun in Florida. That makes a perfect split.
Yeah, it's not everybody's market,
right.
And I love Matthew Cornell. I've known him for years from Winter Park, right? And he was one of my judges last year because he'll never do my show.
Yeah.
He won't go south of Orlando,
Right.
He just won't. So he's like, my stuff doesn't sell. I'm like, okay,
Interesting that you don't, that your jurors aren't. I think a lot of people who have the jurors do just like, hey, here's another little perk. You get a spot in the show.
I see both sides, but for right now, I think it's better if I have your peer artists, not the artists that are intending to be in the show. But that being said, if I think somebody is qualified enough to be a juror and they say, hey, I'd really like to be in your show, or I was going to apply to your show,
right.
I wouldn't have a problem making that exception for them.
Nice. I think we all kind of accept it. It's like, it's part of I get paid a lot more an hour than a jury is going to be able to pay me to take a weekend off,
Sure.
I mean, it's not really about this. It's more about the experience and having the integrity of a exciting show too. And saying, I think every artist should get the opportunity to jury a show, because to see that other side, it can reinvigorate how excited you feel about your work, or maybe even what you are, how you're showing it. I think that can be really, really helpful too. And also to see how much it matters. Like, there's a lot at stake with jurying a show. There's a lot at stake, mostly just how it looks and how it feels and the cohesiveness of the show and having a true vision. And then you're also going to have people like coming to you afterwards like, dude, like two out of 5 said yes, and 3 said, like, what's going on in there? And it's, it's hard. And there's a lot at stake for the artists, maybe a lot more. There are some jurors that'll get in the show and then you just get tired and just go, no. It's like, well, I can't do that. This application, it's important. It's, somebody spent $50 on it to have their work looked at. And that means something. $50 is not nothing.
It's true, and I think it's very important to take your time and to do it right. And I do think it's important to have peers in there. I really do. I mean, last year I really wanted a juror on because there was that jury there was that jeweler scandal right beforehand. And I thought, you know what, I can look, and I run every image through a TinEye search, every image. It takes me forever to do this. But that's still not going to tell me when there's a photoshopped piece of jewelry. Yeah. But having a jeweler like Carla Fox was my jeweler expert on the panel last year, and she would easily be able to tell you that. And it was pretty interesting, I mean, she would point out things like, look at that finding, look how amazing that, and that was pretty cool, I mean, and I really respected that. So I think it's important to have knowledgeable people that do shows and also have run shows. So I got lucky last year. I thought my jury panel was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, you had a pretty impeccable jury.
I got lucky.
No, you knew what you were doing. Hey, we'll call it that.
All right.
You didn't get lucky. You knew where you're going. That's all right.
I did.
Yeah,
Well,
be loud and proud about
it. I had 5 jurors, right?
Yeah.
4 of them were artists, and 4 of them have run shows. So
wow.
It's like almost having 8, right?
Yeah.
Pretty, like I had a woman who runs the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen, Miriam Carter, who was a felt artist and used to do the show circuit before she ended up being their executive director.
Very cool.
I mean, that was the first person I picked, and then it was pretty easy from there. But yeah. Anyway, enough about juries and enough about me.
We've talked about that a lot. I think we've covered that one. Is there anything, like, as far as your side of the table goes? Mm-hmm. I see you out talking to artists. It's never there's never seems to be an animosity thing, which I definitely appreciate. I know some shows definitely have an us and them kind of thing, and I don't know what else would you like us to know as far as running a show and how that goes? Like, what have we not covered?
I don't know. We put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
Like, we know, and I constantly remind my board that without you, we wouldn't have this show. You're not replaceable. Just because there are 1,000 applications doesn't mean that there are 1,000 artists that should be in our show, right?
Right.
We do understand that we're responsible for your livelihood. This is, I always try to explain to people that, if it rains, we lose sales, but they may not make their mortgage payment. There's a difference. I mean, this is how, and I think part of the reason why I really wanted to build up our emerging artist program is because you guys are a community of people. I'm not an artist, but if I could have been, I would have been one of you on a heartbeat, because what an amazing way of life you have, right? And the community I see amongst you is just amazing, which is what I want these young people in our program to understand. Like, I want them to get that this is an alternate way of life, and look at how amazing these people are. Look at what they've been able to do. They've raised their kids. They send them to college. They buy houses. This is not a hobby for you all. This is your livelihood, and I am forever trying to get that point across to my board, but also to the people that are coming to the show. So it's our responsibility to look out for you in many ways.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I appreciate you saying that and doing it and having it matter to you as well. So you mentioned emerging artists, and I want to touch on that as kind of our closing thing, because it's something that you and I are both passionate about. And I don't think any good has ever come from not encouraging a kid in the arts. I was a kid in the arts. I definitely ran up against my brick walls. There's one particular portfolio review that I'll take with me to my grave because it was so offensive. But it's still, I learned something from it. But I just think this is, we really do have to show people, because I don't think schools are teaching it. They look down their nose at it. Professors, not all of them. And I definitely am not ascribing to that old cliche about those who do whatever and those who can't teach. That's bullshit. But I don't think universities are encouraging this middle-class artist lifestyle that is so strong. And some, there's a couple rock stars in here that are more of an upper class, but still, how do we do it? How do you guys do this emerging artist program that you guys, it's been so successful so far?
Well, I'm smart enough to know that I don't need to recreate the wheel. At St. Louis, I mean, I keep talking about St. Louis, but I mean, Cindy Lyric, my goodness, Cindy Lyric developed this program.
Yeah.
And I went to St. Louis to check it out, and I sold it to my board, and then I was smart enough to hire Cindy to come and run it for me, because I believe strongly that there's no point in changing something that's already working. Right. But what I loved about this program, right, and what I felt was missing in my former festival, we had an emerging program, but if all you're doing is giving people a booth and telling them what to do, they're not having the best of all possible experiences, right? Like it's like you're just letting them flounder there on their own, and if they don't catch the fever. Like, I consider it like catching the fever. If they don't see the benefit of having you all as mentors and equals and friends, it's not going to be something that you want to continue doing. Like, I had a girl reach out to me, one of the emerging artists that we picked this year. She reached out and said, I did a show last week and it's just not for me. And I really wanted to tell her, please just stay in the program because maybe you'll see it differently. But then I thought, no, I've got 12 really strong kids that want to do this.
Sure.
So I didn't. But that was my point. Like, I think just by having them do a show without any proper understanding of shows, you're just doing them a disservice.
You are.
I love that it's a 2-year program. And these kids, I mean, they were so excited. On Thursday, we have an artist panel. And we have Evan Reinheimer, my gosh, he did 2 YouTube videos about it.
He's so
was
great.
He is so amazing, right?
And
so
I'll jump in panels. And say, Evan Reinheimer, his YouTube channel, we'll have a link to that, but invaluable information for old timers and beginners. He's a fountain of info. So.
Yeah, and really selfless to take his time to do this, right? Like, because again, he's like us. He believes in moving this industry forward and helping his peers, So he recorded the panel so you can actually see them. And then the next day we showed them how you load your vehicles, how you put together your tents. They have to volunteer or actually have like almost intern. We had 40 artists actually volunteer to be mentors for this program.
Awesome.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like as soon as I sent out the message that we were going to do this, I couldn't even respond to the emails quick enough. I had 40 artists agree to mentor these kids. How great. Amazing it's amazing. That's how generous you all are with your time, right? And so
if somebody's interested in it, then definitely. Yeah. Right. I've only had one mentor situation where somebody came in and I was like, this isn't going to work.
Right.
You're not that interested. You're breaking up sales. And I'm like,
don't do it.
Yeah, sorry. And I don't, I'm like, yeah, he's fired. That's what happened.
But that's fair enough. Yeah. Right. That's fair enough, and so that's what we do. These young adults they're going to show.
Sure.
We're going to have a large tent and we're going to give them pro panels. I believe we're going to have at least 10 of them come back. It's their option. If they made it through the weekend and they really enjoyed it, then they get to show next year and sell their work.
I love that.
Which is awesome. And if they don't, then, we'll just have one less, and we'll have a new crop that are going to be mentors. Yeah, but they'll all have we'll have a pretty big area for them. I'm thinking right now it's going to be like a 20 by 40 tent that will break up and they'll have decent space and it'll be in an area that is very visible, but not amongst the other artists. So they'll be called out as emerging artists.
Interesting.
And, So it's
I've seen both work. I've seen, sometimes they, like you've been mentioning St. Louis, but in St. Louis, it's like kind of at the hot corner, like right there in the center. So they're getting all of the exposure. It's like a lot of us would kill for the emerging artists booth location, which is fine. I like that. And then same with Cherry Creek it's part of the kind of the big lap around the circle. But I like to make sure that they're not just getting, visibility is key. But have you ever heard of the National Folk Festival at all? It's a group that comes together, and I know you're into music, but you should check out their business model because the way they do it, and this is what is kind of inspiring to me as far as emerging artist programs go. It's a 3-year program. The folk festival comes into an area that they think is going to be great, and they came into Richmond where I used to live, which is why I know so much about it. But they come in and they put on a festival, but they put it on, they get and promote this core group of music-loving, art-loving volunteers. And they put it on while the volunteers watch. And then they're watching everything they do. They're at the same meetings. Second year, they do it together. And the volunteers are taking on different, aspects of it. Third year, the volunteers do it completely on their own. And the group that puts it on and starts it watches. And so that I think is really interesting. It's like almost like, okay, this is built. This is a true teach you how to fish kind of experience.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, all the volunteers are just they're fishermen, fisherwomen, fisherhumans, whatever you want to say. And so they're out there doing it and they're putting it on. And now I've seen this group that's now they're going on and doing other festivals too. So it's like this amazing teach me kind of virus that's happening, and it's building and building and growing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so
awesome.
once the National Folk Festival leaves an area, the idea is that this group of volunteers just keeps it going on just forever. And so that is, I see that with an emerging artist kind of thing, where the mentors, I've mentored several different folks over the years, and I've stayed in contact with them. Speaking of your guy from last year, I saw him at South Lake. He's showing.
Really?
Yeah, his booth looked amazing.
Cool. He didn't apply. He didn't apply to be in our show again.
Okay. All
so
right.
I thought maybe he wasn't going to do it. But...
I follow him on Instagram and made sure to go by and see his work. Cool. It looked great. So, but anyway,
so you got to meet him. He's a trip, right?
A trip. Like he belongs with us. He's one of our people. I was like, yeah. It's like, you're a nut. Get over here.
I had this guy who had he applied and he had no knowledge of being, he'd never stepped foot into an art festival.
He'd never gone
before.
to one. Yeah.
He'd never even gone to one, but he was an amazing Venetian plaster painter. And he had this vision, and our jury panel passed him as long as he could produce work that could hang on walls.
Yeah.
And I could barely figure out how to help him. So I passed him along to Will. I said, hey, Will.
But we had some tough love kind of, I'm a pretty no nonsense kind of thing. I was like, well, what are you doing? What are you going to show? And he's like, I'm going to do this and this. And we did a lot of texting, and he sent me pictures, and I'm like, yeah. And he wanted to build a booth. Like, no, here's a list. This isn't going to work. Yeah. No. There's the booth rental thing that happens down in Florida. It might, but I pointed him in the right direction. And I think that the best way to help somebody is, with encouragement and some seriously tough love on that.
Well,
too.
and we didn't have, and he's part of the reason why I realized we needed an emerging artist program, right? Like he would have been, I don't know if he would have been perfect, but he was, that's the person we want to help, right? We want to help these people that really want to do this. I want them to understand that it can be successful.
Right.
This doesn't have to be a weekend hobby.
Exactly.
It can actually be a way that they raise their families, that they pay their mortgages. I keep saying that, but it's the truth, right?
It's 100% the truth. That's
absolutely.
why we're, we do as many shows as we have to do in order to keep the wheels on the wagon. So it's good. So January, you were in January. What stage are you in right now as far as like busyness? Like when does your app open?
My app will open mid-June, because right now I'm actually rewriting all of our categories. I think we need to take a serious look at how we do things. For example, with photography, is it really fair to say that you have to number 1 out of 250 people? I'm just taking a look at everything to try to figure out how to make it fair for everybody and still keep integrity. Right. But I think there might be some things on there that are a little archaic because things have changed so much.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going through the app, trying to figure out where we're going to market. I'm trying to write a grant for emerging artists. So there's just that's what I do right now. And a lot of research. A lot of research.
And going to shows. That's kind of fun. We'll see you this weekend, right?
That is the best part. I get to go and see, and we've got our 60th coming up. Well, it's
awesome.
Our 60th.
Wow.
So we're trying to figure out what special things we want to do. So that's another reason why, I'm going to a lot of different shows because I want to see different things. And, we're trying to think of something really big to do for the 60th, like maybe even an immersive experience. I don't know.
Cool.
I don't know.
We're
just trying to be as, big in the sky right now. And we'll, so that's what my summer looks like.
Just bring the buyers out. We don't do whatever the hell you want.
do whatever it takes to get the buyers. And that's
right.
The goal, right? That's the goal.
That's right.
And that is true. Like you guys don't care that it's our 60th, other than it may bring more people, right? It may bring more people.
Right. Exactly.
Because it'll be a big party.
Yeah.
But again, it'll be an art party. That's what I said when I came. It's always going to be a party, but it'll at least be an art-centric party.
Pinky's out.
Yeah. Well, it's Miami. So, I mean, it's going to be a party, but it's going to be centered around art. Art is not going to be a sideshow to this festival.
Excellent.
Art will remain the center of this festival.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. You have been a joy to talk to, and I appreciate getting the insight and the other side of things. Directors and artists are in this thing together, and all of our success is dependent on each other.
We really are. And I think that's the one thing that I would take away from this.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time and for caring. Yeah.
Always.
We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. I'll see you this weekend.
All right. Thanks again.
Drive safe.
Thank you. Bye, Camille.
Okay. Bye.
Really great conversation you guys had. It was so awesome to hear that other side of the story. You know, the what goes into producing an event, the decisions that get made that we don't always like as artists. Like, for example, mixing up the booth layouts and where we get seen and our visibility. I agree with Will. I did scream at the at my monitor when Camille made that statement. But I understand that point of view, the point of view that the show has to be fresh every year. You know, we can't reproduce the same results year after year after year. That shaking things up is an important part of this business. And if we were left to our own devices, I think us artists would try and recreate the wheel every year and go to the same events and be in the same spot and hope for the same results. And thank you, Camille, and thank you, Will, for getting into those topics and learning about the other side of the industry. Well, this has been a great week, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. We've got some great conversations lined up coming up here in future episodes. I am planning on a conversation here soon with Erica Iman, who is on fire currently. She's been winning awards, and just really excited to sit down and talk to her about her process. She works in different mediums, so it is kind of cool to have conversation with her about working both as a 2D artist and a 3D artist in different mediums. So look forward to that. And I also have planned a conversation with a couple of Zachmans. So that'll be a fun convo to talk to senior and junior. We get to talk about kind of the generation of artists, the passing of the torch, and what that looks like. So stay tuned for that. I know Will has a conversation lined up here with David Mayhew, a photographer, a storm chaser photographer. That is going to be an exciting conversation on some of the stories that he can tell us from capturing his work out there chasing down those tornadoes. So again, thanks for listening this week, everyone, and be safe out there and have some great shows. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.